I saw him as a zombie, a proto-zombie. But I didn't want to regurgitate zombies as we'd basically seen them up to the time. With blue-faced, goggle-eyed, you know, toilet tissue on their face. And one thing I thought of was a wonderful book that I had seen. Actually, Rick Baker had a copy and a couple other people. And it was a how can you say, archaeological book called The Bog People. And it was about people who had died, and in some cases I later found out had been killed, but who were buried in these graves that they had discovered in portions of Europe, where they had been buried under peat, which is, as I take it, a kind of a combination of vegetable matter, mostly mud and so forth, and it had the effect of preserving them, so that you had almost, in some cases of some actual bog people who were disinterred, you saw their facial features completely intact, but they had been pressed and distorted out of shape, like I'm doing to my face over the years.
Visita mi canal.
Oh, great. That's different. So I based the look of the workman on that, and also a couple tried and trues like the filmy fish eye and so forth, and you know, it all contributed to him. We had time, but not a hell of a lot of time. Typically on a costume, classic costumes, like the creature from the Black Lagoon is the example, meaning original and best, really. Also created by a team of people. And it was made out of a dense foam latex, an organic material, where you have the advantage of obvious things, where you have flexibility and you have a certain elasticity. I would use my hand and say, that's flexibility, but if I could stretch my hand, that would be elasticity and hit the microphone. Those are useful things. I felt I had to look at the possibility of sacrificing one of those things in order to make these suits quickly enough, because the downside of foam latex is it's a diva. It sometimes sets up and it sometimes doesn't. That's like, oh no, it does. Not under these, you know, not under these strictures that we're looking at, not under these delivery dates. And Randy said to me at the beginning, if I have 15 of these, 15 replica suits that we can get people to fit by basically having a casting call for height as well as, you know, general configuration, I can use those to create local groupings of much fewer or up to 15, but I can also photograph them, and they will give me enough of a kind of a core group that I can rephotograph them and then rephotograph them again and wind up with 45 if I want them, by layering them with the prevalent special effects technique of the day, still well in use, which was traveling mats. So 15 suits, I thought, ooh, boy, okay. So I made the molds when we finally got the sculpture of the body. And by the way, it's a good time to credit one of the major contributors to my tiny shop, which is a gentleman named Kent Jones, also interestingly enough from Canada. No relation as far as, you know, he wasn't forced on me. I was happy to get him. His assignment was to basically do most of the suit, from about the neck, we're talking arms, the hold on thing down to about the knees. I did the head and the hands, you can call those hands, claws, and then the feet for the minion. And those were designed in such a manner so that they could be pulled on separately. Randy's thinking was that it would give us a little more latitude fitting slightly different people within the general physical requirement. And it worked very, very well. They looked, if you stood a foot away from them, blotchy and kind of crude, but by the time they were reduced by Randy's plan, they looked quite credibly what I wanted them to look like. So we missed another bullet as far as we didn't have to slave over, you know, careful little paint jobs. This stuff was like Jackson Pollock. You know, throw it at it and move on to the next one. But not recklessly, with a kind of an idea behind it. So we had that going on also. We also had a scene in which our little hero, played by now adult, then, I don't know, 7-something years old, maybe, I don't know, Stephen Dorff, he is cursed by the Lord Demon and winds up looking at his hand that's got an eyeball there. And Randy did that a couple of ways. He does an actual optical, which incidentally is his own eyeball, and that looks and blinks. But then at another point, right before Stephen, who's, you know, going to get rid of this mark of the devil, he gets a shard of glass and pops it. And right before he does that, there's this horrified staring eye. Well, that's the prop I built. And that's based on Stephen's own hand. We took it off him, and then I sculpted the eye and made the eye and all that jazz. So that was also something, you know, these jobs, you just tick them off. You find an available chunk of time and you say, okay, I can do the hand today. And I'll, you know, you don't know exactly how much longer it's going to take, but you just plow forth. And that's how I did it. I was definitely up there in Canada past about the first 2 weeks, I think, of shooting, because I was still racing to get ready and getting things in crates, etc., etc. But I got up there in time of necessity to do the first shot with the workman, certainly, and remained there until the end of the shoot, and often assisted as I could Randy in certain things. Like what certain things? Well, I'll tell you what certain things. One example would be when you see the louvered door in the closet where the kids are trying to struggle with the workman coming out of literally the wall again at them. You see some minions kind of chittering away as silhouettes. Well, that's me on one side with two of them doing this, and Randy on the other side doing this. That's all that is. And I'm sure we must have held them in such a fashion so we didn't get our entire arms in. So, you know, hey, who cares how simple it is if it works? And also there are scenes where they're kind of carving their way through the door. Well, I had mechanized one of them so it could do this, one of the arms, the actual miniature arms. And we had that poking out, you know, a weakened prop door, so it looks like they're getting out of the bedroom, let's get out of here. We met a guy up there named Fumi Mishimo, this wonderfully polite, enthusiastic young man who was the nephew of our unit still photographer, whose name was Takashi Seida, and Japanese, both of them. And Fumi had recently come to Canada, what do you call it, emigrated from Japan, and was just nuts for all this stuff. And he was hanging out all the time, almost to the point where sometimes I wished he wasn't there, because, you know, you turn around, there'd be Fumi, you know, like, bah, Fumi, you know, tell me when you're coming away. But again, Randy, I don't know what it is. He sensed in Fumi Mishimo something that was sure as hell there, but I didn't know it, which was that he actually had a lot of potentiality in this area. And Fumi began to help out Randy in certain things any way he could. He helped me out enormously because he became sort of the de facto costume could I say, supervised coordinator would be a good word for it. And I mean hands-on, getting all these young men and women, two women and one big shoot, into these minion costumes, which was no little thing. It wasn't just like, here, put on the coat, pull on the trousers, good, go to set. Because then they had to take a material called dental dam, which is sheet latex used by dentists, hence dental. And the dam part isn't when the guy gets the drill in his tooth. Damn! No, it's an actual dam to isolate a tooth. So it's sheet latex. We had a lot of that, and of necessity, because of the nature of fitting these different, mostly men, we had gaps, and sometimes because of the stiffness of the material that I had to, because of the time frame, make these suits out of, we had to bridge those gaps. And some of the guys were taller or had longer necks, or were in some different configuration when the sculpture was done over the replica of Randy Cook that we used, so that we had, and still can see in the movie, I hate to see them, but they're there, you know, you got this long neck sticking out, almost pop, you know, coming out so they look like they're wearing, you know, what they are wearing, a costume. Obviously they were trapped in the suit, and I mean what you're thinking of. You know, bathroom breaks, everything, when they were totally in there. But the head could come on and off. And that was about their only relief between shots. Except for one guy who was in a tight shot where we actually, you know, had to fill a gap that we had unavoidably with the same technique, and he was good and trapped. And I have a picture which will be on this disc of Fumi giving him oxygen, literally, between takes. I want to say the other delightful thing as a participant on the movie is typical experience of working on a film. Okay, yeah, if you do a thing that's a physical effect in a confined space, you see it in dailies. That's understood. But when you have little tiny monsters chasing a little girl into a house, you don't expect to see that in dailies. We did. We did. When Krista's legs, and it was her, go running up the wooden steps from outside when we first see the minions, and they chase right up the stairs after her, that was shot with the forced perspective technique. And hats off to Randy for the concept and the whole, you know, basically visualization of it. Hats off to the late William Beaton, who was also an architect, not just a production designer, for coming up with the geometry that made it work. And the lighting. Peter Benison was the second unit DP. Frank Carrere, the physical effects guy who helped set the whole thing up. It takes a lot of people sometimes to make a thing of that dimension work. The smaller the film and the budget, the more work and responsibility goes to what personnel they can afford. More work, longer hours. By the time the movie was finished, it's the old thing, you know, stick a fork in me, I'm done. And we all felt like that. But I think we all felt like we'd had a good time, you know, in spite of becoming the Walking Dead ourselves. And we knew we had an interesting thing in the can, and we were all kind of like, boy, I wonder how this will go over. Well, I believe it went over to the extent that it was the most profitable Canadian film, almost, that had ever been produced in the country, or in the running for, which is wonderful and amazing. And not that surprising, because I think once it got discovered, almost like, well, I'll look at it, you know, by the fan that saw the lurid poster, but effective, when it first came out, must have said, hey, you got to check this out. You know, this isn't what, go see it. Just go see it. And so I'm very happy that it turned out like that. It had been basically a hell of a lot of fun to work on. And it was a great working with Randy. I'd known him, but the first time I'd actually worked with him, and it was a real pleasure. The beauty of working on The Gate with Randy was that he absolutely maxed out the potential that we had. Now, what does that mean? It means we had this much time, this much money, no more, and this much of a corridor to shoot these things. And I want to give full props, by the way, to Tibor Takács, who went to Randy. Randy didn't go to him. Tibor went to Randy specifically on the basis of some stuff that he knew Randy had done. And I'm very proud of the way The Gate worked out, because I think the way that things were shot was brilliant as far as some of Randy's setup, and certainly good enough in every other angle. You know, I would like to have seen the workman a little more, but he wasn't written anymore. And anybody that agrees with me, thank you. But you know, he's right. He came out of the wall, he grabbed the kid, went into the wall, and then he pops up again in the bedroom, and he's out of there. So, you know, that's the movies.
Hi, we're here to talk about The Gate. Randall William Cook.
Oh yes,
Randy.
Randy, yeah, there's more. That's yeah, Randy Cook and Tibor Takács. I don't even know your middle name.
Stephen.
Stephen. Tibor Stephen Takács. So there you go. Is there a Z in SZ?
No,
T?
no.
Okay.
Stefan or Istvan.
Istvan.
There
Yeah,
you go.
see.
Yes, yeah.
Then it is Istvan, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Well, you should have said that.
Well, you know, I forgot.
Anyway, hi. We're here reminiscing a little walk down memory lane. Probably not hand in hand, but you never know.
I saw one of the questions was, how did we ever get together, or how did we ever find each other?
Jean.
Greg Jean.
Yeah.
He's the guy that introduced us, and I think his claim to fame at the time was he built the models for Close Encounters, or
And many things. He was like the top miniaturist in the business at the time.
And
certainly in the fantasy business.
And we talked a little about the script, and you know, he was busy, I can't remember, and then he said, you know, you've got to see this guy, Randy Cook, you know, and okay, you know, I put you on the list, and then I met with you, I gave you the script, and right away I had a really good vibe. As soon as you responded, it felt like you were talking about the opportunities that this presented as opposed to the limitations. Every other person I spoke to spoke about, oh, low budget, fast schedule, you know, how could you ever do any of this stuff? But you talked about, wow, this is cool, like we can do this, we can try that, we can do this. And I thought, well, this is the man.
Well, I was desperate. I hadn't at the time worked on something that I'd really enjoyed, that was really challenging.
Now, where were you working?
I was working at Richard Edlund's place.
Yeah, and I went to see you there.
Yeah, and I was just basically an oarsman on a death ship, you know, and I was dying to get off, you know, and then here's this other ship steaming by. I'm thinking, this looks good, you know, this, and I read the script. It was a good script, and you seemed like a good guy, and you seemed amicable, you know, and you seemed you know, I mean, we just had a good, you know, a good response to one another.
My philosophy has always been collaborative. Part of what I liked about what you said was your approach to the comedic part of this. I always consider horror movies to be almost like black comedy.
Yeah.
And without winking to the audience.
No, you don't want to do that.
Yeah,
I mean,
and you seem to sort of tune right into the type of humor I thought should be in the movie. I didn't want it to be absolutely serious. So most people I spoke to just sort of take it that way, or they want it to be campy.
And most horror movies, I mean, that's, you know, and we like Lubitsch and Sturges and Wilder and people who are, you know, a lot, you know, higher class humorists than the lower class campy ones. And also horror movies, to me, are very seldom really scary. Certainly not monster ones, you know. And so you look for something else that's just an exhilarating, you know, aspect to the films. And this thing had little monsters and big monsters, and I thought, well, God, we get to do monsters. We get to design monsters, and it'll be great, you know?
Yeah, and it had a context that you could have fun with.
Yeah.
You were inside the kid's imagination, and that was always, to me, a very important thing, is to put it in a context where we could enjoy the whatever fun we were going to have, the fear, the funny stuff, the gags, you know, just because we were in the kid's imagination, and that gave us license to do just about anything. The monsters could look, you know, not exactly, you know, photoreal, but it's in their imagination. This is how they saw it. So it was like a context that.
Well, it wasn't really hard to access at our tender age then, the feelings and
the nostalgia.
Emotions of kids, you know, and being in touch with our inner juvenile delinquents, right? And the creatures were. I don't know, just fun to do, and we both, I think, wanted to come up with something that was different than what was being offered up in those days.
Yeah, which
you know?
was Freddy, which I enjoyed, but you know, it's not the. I don't know. My favorite horror films, like classic, to me, Snow White is a horror film.
Yeah.
Because when I saw it, I was frightened to death. That's one of my first film experiences, was watching, you know, Snow White, and then the scene in the forest with all the eyes opening. That to me, but the sort of
surreal as well as horrific,
surreal, kind of a European approach to psychological horror. You know, that happens in the mind. It's all how you see it, how the kids see it, and that the script had that, and we just kept pushing more of that into it, like. I think the dream sequence in the opening was part of that sort of agenda that I was trying to get across, was to create this context of we're in the kid's mind. And from a production viewpoint, I remember that the whole sort of schedule was designed around being able to allow you a complete room, like a stage, to build your set, tear it down, build another one, tear it down, build another one.
Well, that was funny because we were at Kleinberg, right? At Kleinberg Studios, And right after the fly moved out of there.
Yeah.
And we were worried that there were going to be a lot of flies on the stage.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell we were thinking. But, too literal, right? But anyway, so we got there, and we had the effects stage, and we had the others. We had live action,
Yeah.
you know, principal photography stage. And the thing was, we had planned everything out very carefully for these shots, of course, and we'd been planning for weeks and months. And we got there, and they were planned out, but we didn't have the time to shoot any tests.
Yeah.
So
everything
basically
was
the
a test.
test
Yeah.
is what's in the movie.
That's right. I told that to somebody the other day. They didn't quite understand what I meant, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was it, because we didn't have time. We had to get it
Yeah.
on take one.
That's right.
And if it wasn't quite right, so be it. But they were planned out, and you know, it was the method for planning them out. You dream it up first, right? And even our great art director, Bill Beaton, who was wonderful. At first, he didn't get what I was getting at when I was talking about these things. And I said, well, look, you know, let's say that corner over there is where it's gonna be, and you aim the camera. You put the camera here, so you're 3 feet off. You're 3 feet off. Let's say this is 3 feet. You're 3 feet off the ground. And it's quarter scale. So the camera's really got to be 12 feet
Yeah.
off the ground. So that means with simple addition applied, addition and subtraction, the camera's got to be on a 3 foot tripod on sticks 3 feet off the ground, but that ground that you're putting it on has got to be 9 feet off the studio floor,
yeah.
because that section there that we've taped out is going to be cut out in the foreground, right?
Yeah.
In the foreground live action piece that is 1:1 scale, and you see through that, and that you see beyond has to be built 4:1 scale, right? And you've got to have every point measured out from the center of the lens so that it lines up.
And you have the nodal point head.
Yeah, so you can
So
do
the thing moved on the film plane, and you could actually do camera moves. Which
pans and tilts were about as far as we could do as much as we could do in those days on camera moves before we were really freed up by the computer. But you know, it was more than a lot of films had. You know, you couldn't pan and tilt around, and so effect shots were usually then nailed down, right, nailed to the floor.
And that's what I thought.
Although we did do that Minion shot, we did Minion, Bannister, Demon Lord, his first close-up, where we went
motion control
through. Yeah, it was fake motion control, right? And we had to go through a 1:1 door thing to past the Minions, who were 4:1, right? You know, and then up to the Demon Lord, who was 12:1, maybe. I mean, he was 12th scale, I think. So it was 3 scales working in that one shot, and it was all just sort of grabbed on the fly.
Yeah, some fun stuff.
Oh, it was, and it was very exciting.
Yeah.
You know, I'm getting excited just, you know, reminiscing, you know, all these years later, because there was a lot of adrenaline that went into these things. And at first, you know, the guys who went off onto my unit, the effects unit, second unit, as it were, but it was called effects unit, and they didn't want to work effects unit. We don't want to do this, you know, God damn it, we want to be where the action is, right? And I said, look, you know, I gave them a little speech. I said, look, we're going to be doing something different, so we're going to have a closed set. And it was only for a little while.
Yeah.
We're going to have a closed set. We're not going to tell people what's going on. And whatever. And so we built a shot with girl in the foreground standing on. I don't remember which one was the first one, but it was it was a fairly showy shot to get started off on, where you tilt down from the girl and she's standing there.
Yeah, in the garden,
in the garden, and the Minions are there.
Yeah, that was.
And so it was starting to come together, and the guys were sort of, you know, working, you know, begrudgingly on this thing, because they were working for.
Till you see it, you don't get it.
Yeah. And so I had everybody in the crew troop up, get on the ladder and troop up and look through the lens. And by the time that was done, they were saying, "This is really cool."
Yeah.
I said, "Don't tell anybody how we're doing this." Okay. You know, and so we became sort of a secret society.
Yeah.
You know, it was pretty neat until somebody somebody in L.A. called us. I think when the Minions ran up the stairs, which was shot, I just saw a tape of that, and the slate said May 6th, 1986.
That's right. Yeah.
And how did you get these Minions to move? How did you do this? Blah blah blah. And when I finally told them how it was done, they said, "That's all?" I said, "Yeah." "Well, that's no big deal."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, yeah, that's why you don't tell people that there's a trapdoor underneath the magician's top hat, right?"
Yeah.
We were working out of my
Apartment.
and we just sit and talk and do storyboards. So we did have the chance to really sit and plan out all these shots once we'd done it. You know, once we decided what the approach was going to be.
Yeah.
But one day the ideas weren't coming, you know, and the drawings weren't working, and I said, "You know, I'm really dry." And Tibor said, "Well, that's okay. Let's design the minions." I go, "You don't design the minions. I'm not a machine. You don't put a quarter in and you get a minion out. You know?
You wind up the key.
Yeah, I know. But I said, okay, yeah, you know, because we're on the clock and what have you. So, you know, I start drawing, and it really came easily. Now, I'd been a Disney cartoonist for a year, but I was kind of out of shape drawing, and I was starting to get back into shape doing the storyboards, but the character design, it was a little tough. But anyhow, this thing was it just flowed. I looked at Tibor and I said, "What do you think?" He said, "Yeah, it's pretty good, you know." Well, we got to show Kemeny, so what I had to do was take this tiny little drawing, because no producer, you know, wants to see a tiny little chicken shit drawing, right? They don't want to
They're not
pay
going to
money
pay for that little thing.
No, they'll pay for this. So you take it down to the print shop on the corner, and you get them to blow it up, and then you have this big drawing, big version of this. And so it's blown up, and you put it on foam core, and you put vellum over that, and then you can reveal it, you know, do the big reveal. And so we take it down to Kemeny's office in Beverly Hills. John Kemeny, an older, bald Hungarian producer, friend of Tibor from way back, I guess, and Kemeny's
very
looking
serious,
at it,
stoic dude,
terribly serious, and and sort of the Alexander Cord, the model,
formal, a little
yes.
bit, yeah.
So John's, I take it, and I reveal it, like that, and I'm looking at the minion, then I'm looking at John, I'm looking at the minion, looking at John, he's staring at it, and I realize, holy fuck, it's a caricature of John Kemeny. I mean, it's, and I look back and forth, and I'm going, and I said, well, this isn't really written in stone, this is just an idea. He said, no, I love it. The big blubbery lips and the bulbous eyes, and don't change anything. And I'm thinking, okay, goes down, and we go, and
what a score!
What a score! That went like that. Just like that. It just, and so we were driving away in Tibor's big muscle car down Santa Monica Boulevard, and Tibor doesn't remember this way, but I remember it clearly because I was still, all the antennae were still going like this. Tibor was happy it got accepted.
Yeah,
I
thought we'd be in for a fight or something.
And I was happy it got accepted, but I was looking at the bigger picture. I said, Tibor's a that went well, huh? He said, yeah. I said, the minion look like anybody to you? He said, well, I said, John Kemeny? And Tibor's driving, goes, oh, shit! Did you do that on purpose? He nearly drove up on the side. I didn't, I swear I didn't. It was totally subconscious, right?
Yeah.